Maya Johnson sat in her small apartment kitchen, staring at the stack of unpaid bills spread across the worn wooden table. At 28 years old, she had built what many would consider a successful life. She worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm downtown, had her own place, and maintained close friendships with colleagues who often envied her independence and creativity. Yet something always felt missing, like a puzzle piece that never quite fit into place. The feeling had been there since childhood, growing stronger with each passing year. Maya had been adopted when she was just 6 months old by Eleanor and Robert Johnson, a loving white couple who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. They had tried for years to have children of their own before deciding to adopt. When they first saw Maya at the adoption agency, Eleanor later told her, they knew immediately she was meant to be their daughter. Growing up, Maya never questioned her place in the family. Eleanor and Robert treated her with nothing but love and support. They celebrated her achievements, comforted her during difficult times, and made sure she understood that being adopted didn't make her any less their child. The Johnson household was filled with warmth, laughter, and the kind of stability that many children take for granted. However, Maya couldn't shake the curiosity about her biological parents. Who were they? Why had they given her up? Did she have siblings somewhere in the world? These questions became more persistent as she entered her 20s. She had tried bringing up the subject with Eleanor and Robert a few times over the years, but the conversations always seemed to make them uncomfortable. They would gently redirect the discussion, reminding her that they were her real family and that the past didn't matter as much as the love they shared. Eleanor, now in her early 60s, had become increasingly protective whenever the topic of Maya's adoption came up. She would get a worried look in her eyes and quickly change the subject. Robert, always the more reserved of the two, would simply nod along with whatever Eleanor said. Maya respected their feelings and didn't want to hurt them, so she had learned to keep her questions to herself. The curiosity reached a breaking point during Maya's 27th birthday celebration. As she sat surrounded by her adoptive family and friends, watching everyone laugh and share memories, she felt more disconnected than ever. She looked around the room at faces that, while beloved, shared no physical resemblance to her own. Her dark skin, curly hair, and distinctive features stood out in family photos, and while the Johnsons had always made her feel included, Maya couldn't help but wonder about the people who had given her those features. That night, alone in her apartment, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her laptop and began researching ways to find biological parents. She discovered various websites and services designed to help adopted children connect with their birth families. The process seemed overwhelming at first, with forms to fill out, fees to pay, and no guarantee of success. Maya spent weeks reading testimonials from other adopted individuals who had successfully found their biological families. Some stories were heartwarming reunions that brought healing and joy to all parties involved. Others were more complicated, involving rejection, disappointment, or family secrets that were better left buried. Despite the risks, Maya felt compelled to move forward. She started by requesting her adoption records from the agency that had handled her case. The process required legal paperwork and patience, as many adoption records from the 1990s were sealed or incomplete. Maya filled out every form carefully, providing as much information as she could remember from conversations with Eleanor and Robert over the years. While waiting for the records, Maya began taking DNA tests through various genealogy websites. She hoped that genetic matches might provide clues about her biological family tree. The simple process of spitting into a tube and mailing it off felt both exciting and terrifying. Within a few weeks, she would have scientific data about her heritage that she had never known. The waiting period was agonizing. Maya found herself checking her email constantly, hoping for updates from the adoption agency or results from the DNA tests. She threw herself into work projects, trying to stay busy and distracted. Her friends noticed she seemed more preoccupied than usual, but Maya wasn't ready to share what she was going through. She worried they might not understand her need to find her biological family, especially since she had such loving adoptive parents. During this time, Maya also began paying closer attention to her own characteristics and traits, wondering which ones might have come from her biological parents. She had always been artistic and creative, with a natural eye for design and color. She was also tall for a woman, standing nearly 6 feet with long limbs and graceful movements. Her friends often commented on her distinctive laugh and her ability to light up a room with her smile. As the weeks passed, Maya felt as though she was standing at the edge of a cliff about to jump into the unknown. She had no idea what she might discover about her origins, or how that information might change her relationship with the family who had raised her with such love and care. All she knew was that the questions that had haunted her for years demanded answers, and she was finally brave enough to seek them out. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while Maya was getting ready for work. Her phone buzzed with a notification from one of the DNA testing companies, and her heart immediately began racing. She sat down on her unmade bed, hands trembling slightly as she opened the message that would provide her first real clues about her biological heritage. The results were more detailed than she had expected. According to the genetic analysis, Maya was primarily of West African descent, with smaller percentages of European and Native American ancestry. But what caught her attention immediately were the DNA matches. Dozens of people who shared genetic material with her, ranging from distant cousins to much closer relatives. At the top of the list was a match labeled as a potential half-sibling or aunt, someone named Patricia Williams who lived just 2 states away in Pennsylvania. Maya stared at the name for several minutes, trying to process what this meant. She had a close genetic relative who was still alive and potentially findable. Maya screenshot the results and spent her lunch break researching Patricia Williams online. Social media profiles revealed a woman in her 40s who worked as a nurse and had 3 children. Patricia had dark skin similar to Maya's, along with the same distinctive smile and tall frame. The resemblance was unmistakable, even in the small profile pictures Maya could access. For days, Maya debated whether to reach out to Patricia through the DNA website's messaging system. What would she say? How do you contact a complete stranger who might be your aunt or half-sister? Maya drafted and deleted dozens of messages, each attempt feeling either too casual or overly dramatic for such a significant moment. Finally, she settled on a simple, honest message explaining that she was adopted and had recently received DNA results showing they were closely related. She asked if Patricia would be willing to chat and possibly help her learn more about her biological family. After reading the message one final time, Maya took a deep breath and hit send. The response came faster than expected. Patricia replied within hours, her message filled with excitement and disbelief. She explained that she had been searching for a missing family member for years and believed Maya might be her long-lost niece. Patricia's sister, Denise Williams, had given birth to a baby girl in 1995 and placed her for adoption. The timing and details aligned perfectly with Maya's birth records. Patricia suggested they talk on the phone, and Maya agreed immediately. That evening, Maya paced around her apartment for 20 minutes before finally dialing Patricia's number. The conversation that followed would reshape everything Maya thought she knew about her origins. Patricia's voice was warm and emotional as she shared the story Maya had been desperate to hear her entire life. Denise Williams had been just 19 years old when she became pregnant with Maya. She was a college student studying to become a teacher, working part-time jobs to pay for school while living with Patricia and their mother in a small apartment. When Denise discovered she was pregnant, she was terrified. The baby's father was a fellow student who disappeared as soon as he learned about the pregnancy, leaving Denise to face the situation alone. Their mother, Patricia explained, was a strong woman who worked 2 jobs to support the family, but they were already struggling financially. Adding another mouth to feed seemed impossible. Denise had considered keeping the baby, but ultimately decided that adoption would give her child the best possible chance at a stable, comfortable life. The decision was heartbreaking for the entire family, Patricia recalled with tears in her voice. They had all fallen in love with the baby during the pregnancy, but Denise was convinced she was making the right choice for her daughter's future. Patricia painted a picture of Denise as a loving, intelligent young woman who was devastated by the adoption decision, but determined to do what she believed was best for her child. After the birth, Denise threw herself into her studies and eventually became an elementary school teacher. She married a few years later and had 2 sons, Maya's half-brothers, but never stopped thinking about the daughter she had placed for adoption. The most shocking revelation came near the end of their conversation. Patricia hesitated before sharing that Denise had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, when Maya was 23. She had passed away without ever knowing whether her first child was happy, healthy, or loved by her adoptive family. Maya felt the world shift beneath her feet as she processed this information. The biological mother she had dreamed of meeting, the woman whose face she had tried to imagine countless times, was gone. All the conversations Maya had fantasized about having, all the questions she wanted to ask, would never happen. Through her tears, Patricia continued sharing memories of Denise. She described a woman who was passionate about education, who loved reading and music, and who had an infectious laugh that could brighten anyone's day. Denise had been artistic, just like Maya, often sketching in notebooks during quiet moments. Patricia promised to gather photos and mementos that she could share with Maya. The conversation lasted nearly 3 hours, with Patricia filling in gaps about Maya's biological family that she had wondered about for years. She learned about grandparents who had passed away, cousins she had never met, and family traditions that suddenly made her own personality traits make sense. When they finally hung up, Maya sat in her dark apartment feeling emotionally drained but also strangely complete. She had answers to questions that had haunted her for decades. But those answers came with new grief she hadn't anticipated. The mother she had never known was gone forever. But through Patricia's stories, Denise felt more real and present than she ever had in Maya's imagination. Maya couldn't concentrate on work for the rest of the week. Her mind kept drifting to the phone conversation with Patricia and all the information she had learned about Denise. Every few hours she would find herself staring at her computer screen, not seeing the design projects in front of her, but instead trying to imagine what her biological mother had been like as a person. Patricia had promised to send photos and keepsakes that belonged to Denise, and Maya checked her mailbox obsessively. When the package finally arrived the following Saturday, Maya's hand shook as she opened it. Inside was a treasure trove of memories from a life she had never known existed. The first thing she pulled out was a photo of Denise holding a baby who could only be Maya. Denise looked so young, barely out of her teens, but her face was filled with love and sadness as she gazed down at her daughter. Maya studied every detail of her biological mother's face, finally seeing where her own features had come from. They had the same eyes, the same nose, and even similar expressions. There were more photos showing Denise throughout her pregnancy and in the months following Maya's birth. Patricia had included pictures of Denise's graduation from college, her wedding, and moments with Maya's half-brothers, Marcus and David. Maya spread the photos across her coffee table, creating a timeline of the mother she would never meet. Among the keepsakes was a journal that Denise had kept during her pregnancy. Patricia had hesitated to include it, she explained in an accompanying letter, but ultimately decided that Maya deserved to know her mother's thoughts during that difficult time. The journal entries were raw and emotional, documenting Denise's internal struggle about whether to keep the baby or choose adoption. Maya read each entry carefully, often pausing when the emotions became too overwhelming. Denise wrote about feeling the baby move for the first time, about choosing the name Maya because it meant illusion or dream in Sanskrit, and about hoping her daughter would understand why adoption was the only choice she felt she could make. One entry, written just days before Maya's birth, brought tears to Maya's eyes. Denise wrote about wanting to give her daughter everything, but knowing she couldn't provide the stability and opportunities that adoptive parents could offer. She promised to think about Maya every day, and to hope that somewhere, her little girl was growing up happy and loved. The journal also revealed details about Maya's biological father that Patricia hadn't mentioned during their phone call. His name was James Mitchell, and he had been a music major at Denise's college. According to the journal entries, Denise had been deeply in love with him, but he had panicked when she told him about the pregnancy. He transferred to a different school and cut off all contact, leaving Denise to face everything alone. Maya found herself feeling angry at James in a way she hadn't expected. While she understood that teenage pregnancies could be overwhelming, she couldn't comprehend how someone could completely abandon the woman carrying his child. The journal entries showed how much his rejection had hurt Denise, adding another layer of difficulty to an already impossible situation. Patricia had also included some of Denise's artwork, sketches and paintings that showed real talent. Maya was amazed by the similarity in their artistic styles. Both favored bold colors and flowing lines, and several of Denise's pieces looked like they could have been created by Maya herself. It was the first time Maya felt a tangible connection to her biological heritage. The package also contained letters that Denise had written to Maya over the years but never sent. Patricia explained that Denise would write them on Maya's birthday each year, sharing what was happening in her life and expressing her hopes for her daughter's future. The letters painted a picture of a woman who never stopped loving the child she had placed for adoption. In the final letter, written just months before Denise's death, she wrote about her sons but also about the daughter she still thought about every day. She expressed regret about not trying harder to find Maya and wondered if she was happy, successful, and surrounded by people who loved her. Reading those words, Maya felt a bittersweet connection to the mother who had died, not knowing that all her hopes for her daughter had come true. Maya called Patricia again that evening, overwhelmed by everything she had discovered. Patricia shared more stories about Denise's personality, how she would laugh until she cried at funny movies, how she volunteered at literacy programs for adults, and how she always seemed to know exactly what to say to make people feel better about themselves. During their conversation, Patricia mentioned that Denise's sons, Marcus and David, knew about Maya's existence. Denise had told them about their half-sister when they were old enough to understand, and they had always wondered about her. Patricia asked if Maya would be interested in meeting them, explaining that they lived nearby and were eager to connect with their sister. The idea of having half-brothers was both exciting and terrifying for Maya. She had grown up as an only child and had always wondered what it would be like to have siblings. Patricia described Marcus, who was 25 and worked as a mechanic, and David, who was 23 and still in college studying computer science. Both young men had inherited their mother's kind nature and were apparently excited about the possibility of meeting Maya. Maya agreed to meet them, and Patricia arranged for everyone to get together the following weekend at her house in Pennsylvania. The drive would take Maya about 4 hours, giving her plenty of time to think about what she wanted to say to her half-brothers and how this meeting might change her understanding of family. As she prepared for the trip, Maya realized she needed to tell Eleanor and Robert about what she had discovered. She had been keeping her search secret from them, worried about hurting their feelings, but the situation had grown too significant to hide any longer. She decided she would talk to them when she returned from Pennsylvania after meeting Marcus and David. The drive to Patricia's house felt like the longest 4 hours of Maya's life. She had changed her outfit 3 times that morning, unsure what to wear to meet half-brothers she didn't know existed a month ago. Her car was filled with nervous energy as she practiced conversations in her head, trying to imagine what Marcus and David would be like and whether they would accept her as family. Patricia lived in a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood outside Philadelphia. When Maya pulled into the driveway, she could see faces peering out from behind the front window curtains. Her heart pounded as she gathered the flowers she had brought for Patricia and walked toward the front door. Patricia answered before Maya could knock, pulling her into a warm hug that immediately put her at ease. In person, the family resemblance was even more striking. Patricia had the same tall frame and expressive eyes as Maya, and her smile was identical to the one Maya saw in photos of Denise. Inside the house, 2 young men stood awkwardly in the living room, clearly as nervous as Maya felt. Marcus was tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair and gentle eyes. David was leaner and wore glasses, with an easy smile that reminded Maya of the photos she had seen of their mother. The first few minutes were filled with polite small talk as everyone tried to figure out how to navigate this unprecedented situation. Patricia served coffee and homemade cookies, keeping up a steady stream of conversation to fill the silence. Maya found herself studying her half-brothers' faces, looking for similarities and differences, trying to reconcile the fact that these were people who shared her blood. The ice began to break when David mentioned that he had always wondered what it would be like to have a sister. He explained that Denise had told them about Maya when they were teenagers, sharing age-appropriate details about the adoption and why she had made that choice. Both boys had grown up knowing they had a sister somewhere in the world. Marcus, who was more reserved than David, eventually opened up about his memories of their mother talking about Maya. He said Denise would sometimes get a distant look in her eyes on certain days, and they learned that those were usually around Maya's birthday or the anniversary of the adoption. She never spoke about Maya with regret, Marcus explained, but rather with hope and love. As the afternoon progressed, the conversation became more natural and comfortable. Maya learned that Marcus had inherited Denise's practical nature and worked with his hands, finding satisfaction in fixing engines and mechanical problems. David had gotten their mother's love of learning and was studying computer science with dreams of developing educational software for children. Both brothers shared stories about growing up with Denise as a single mother before she remarried. They painted a picture of a woman who was incredibly dedicated to her children's education and happiness, often working extra hours to pay for music lessons, sports equipment, or school trips. She had been the kind of mother who showed up to every game and performance, cheering loudly from the sidelines. Maya found herself feeling a complex mix of emotions as she listened to these stories. She was happy to learn more about Denise's character and parenting style, but she also felt a pang of sadness about missing out on that relationship. The brothers she was meeting seemed to have had the kind of close, loving relationship with their mother that Maya had always imagined having with her biological parent. Patricia noticed Maya's emotional state and gently redirected the conversation to focus on Maya's life. She asked about her work as a graphic designer, her interests, and her adoptive family. Maya shared stories about Eleanor and Robert, describing the loving home they had provided and the opportunities they had given her. David was particularly interested in Maya's artistic abilities, and she showed him some of her design work on her phone. The brothers were amazed by the similarity between Maya's style and some of their mother's artwork that Patricia had around the house. It was clear that creative talent ran in their family. As evening approached, Marcus suggested they visit their mother's gravesite. Maya's breath caught in her throat at the suggestion, but she knew she needed to see the place where Denise was buried. The cemetery was just a few miles away, and they drove there together in Patricia's car. Denise's headstone was simple but elegant, with her name, dates, and an inscription that read beloved mother, sister, and teacher. Maya stood quietly beside the grave while Marcus and David shared memories of their last visits with their mother. Patricia placed fresh flowers on the headstone and stepped back to give Maya some private time. Maya had imagined this moment differently. She had always thought that if she found her biological mother, they would have years to get to know each other and build a relationship. Instead, she found herself speaking to a headstone, telling Denise about her life and thanking her for making the difficult decision to place her for adoption. Through her tears, Maya told Denise about Eleanor and Robert, about her education and career, and about the love and stability she had known growing up. She wanted her biological mother to know that her sacrifice had been worthwhile, that Maya had grown up happy and successful exactly as Denise had hoped. On the drive back to Patricia's house, Maya felt emotionally drained but also strangely peaceful. Meeting Marcus and David had given her a sense of biological family she had never experienced before. They weren't just genetic relatives. They were genuinely good people who welcomed her warmly and made her feel like she belonged. Before leaving for home that evening, Patricia pulled Maya aside and handed her another envelope. Inside were copies of Denise's college transcripts, teaching certificates, and other documents that painted a picture of an intelligent, dedicated woman who had worked hard to build a good life for her family. The drive home gave Maya time to process everything she had experienced. She had left that morning as someone searching for answers about her past, and she was returning as someone who finally understood her origins and had gained 2 half-brothers and an aunt who clearly loved her. But Maya also realized that her journey of discovery was far from over. She still needed to tell Eleanor and Robert about what she had learned, and she wasn't sure how they would react to the news that she had been in contact with her biological family. Maya spent the entire week after visiting Patricia, rehearsing what she would say to Eleanor and Robert. She had decided to tell them everything during their usual Sunday dinner at their house, but as the day approached, her anxiety grew stronger. These were the people who had raised her, loved her unconditionally, and given her every opportunity in life. The last thing she wanted was to hurt them or make them feel like they weren't enough. Sunday afternoon arrived gray and drizzling, matching Maya's nervous mood. She drove the familiar route to her childhood home, passing the elementary school where she had learned to read, the park where Robert had taught her to ride a bike, and the ice cream shop where Eleanor had taken her to celebrate good report cards. Eleanor greeted her at the door with a warm hug, and the smell of Maya's favorite meal cooking in the kitchen. Robert emerged from his study, glasses perched on his head and a genuine smile on his face. This was the family that had shaped her into the person she was today, and Maya felt a wave of love and gratitude mixed with her apprehension. During dinner, Maya struggled to focus on the conversation. Eleanor chatted about her book club's latest selection, while Robert shared updates about his retirement activities and the garden he was planning for spring. Maya contributed to the discussion, but her mind kept drifting to the photos of Denise in her purse and the phone numbers for Marcus and David, saved in her phone. After they finished eating and moved to the living room for coffee, Maya knew she couldn't delay any longer. Her hands trembled slightly as she cleared her throat and asked if they could talk about something important. The change in atmosphere was immediate. Both Eleanor and Robert straightened up, their expressions becoming concerned. Maya began by thanking them for everything they had done for her over the years. She emphasized how grateful she was for their love and support, and how they would always be her parents regardless of biology. She could see Eleanor's eyes beginning to worry, and Robert reached for his wife's hand. Then Maya explained about the DNA test and her contact with Patricia. She shared what she had learned about Denise and her half-brothers, being careful to emphasize that meeting her biological family hadn't diminished her love for Eleanor and Robert. She showed them photos of Marcus and David, pointing out family resemblances they might not have noticed before. Eleanor's reaction was not what Maya had expected. Instead of hurt or jealousy, her adoptive mother's eyes filled with tears of what appeared to be relief mixed with sadness. She asked quietly if Maya had found the answers she had been looking for all these years, and whether meeting her biological family had brought her peace. Robert, always the more practical one, asked detailed questions about the DNA testing process and how Maya had managed to locate Patricia. He seemed genuinely interested in the science behind genetic matching and impressed by Maya's determination to find her roots. Then Eleanor surprised Maya by standing up and leaving the room without explanation. She returned a few minutes later carrying a wooden box that Maya had never seen before. With shaking hands, Eleanor opened the box and revealed its contents, dozens of documents, photos and letters related to Maya's adoption. Through tears, Eleanor explained that they had kept everything the adoption agency had given them about Maya's background. There were medical records from Denise's pregnancy, photos of Maya as a newborn, and even a letter that Denise had written to Maya's future parents. Eleanor had hidden these items because she was afraid that if Maya learned too much about her biological mother, she might want to leave them and find her real family. Maya was stunned as Eleanor handed her the letter from Denise. In it, her biological mother had written to Eleanor and Robert, thanking them for giving Maya the life she couldn't provide. Denise expressed her hope that Maya would grow up knowing she was loved by both her biological and adoptive families, and she included details about Maya's medical history and family background that could be important as she grew older. Reading the letter, Maya realized that Denise had chosen Eleanor and Robert specifically after learning about their backgrounds and their desire to have children. The adoption hadn't been random. Denise had carefully selected the couple she believed would give Maya the best possible life. Eleanor's voice broke as she apologized for keeping the information secret for so many years. She explained that as Maya got older and began asking questions about her adoption, Eleanor had become increasingly afraid of losing her. She worried that if Maya found her biological family, she would realize that Eleanor and Robert were just substitutes for her real parents. Maya immediately reassured Eleanor that nothing could ever change their relationship. She explained that meeting Patricia, Marcus, and David had actually made her more grateful for the home Eleanor and Robert had provided. Seeing the struggles that Denise had faced as a young single mother made Maya appreciate even more the stability and opportunities her adoptive parents had given her. Robert, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. He told Maya that they had always known this day might come, and while it had been difficult to think about, they wanted her to be happy and complete. He said they were proud of her for being brave, enough to search for her roots and glad that she had found good people who welcomed her into their family. The three of them spent the rest of the evening going through the contents of the box. Eleanor shared memories from Maya's early years that she had never mentioned before, including some challenges Maya had faced as a mixed-race child in their predominantly white community. She also revealed that they had always planned to give Maya the adoption records when she turned 21, but had lost their nerve when the time came. Among the documents was contact information for the adoption agency that had handled Maya's case. Eleanor explained that the agency had offered to facilitate contact between Maya and her biological family if she ever wanted to reach out, but they had never mentioned this option to Maya because of their own fears and insecurities. As Maya prepared to leave that evening, Eleanor pulled her aside for a private conversation. She asked if Maya would be willing to meet Marcus and David, explaining that she had always wondered about Maya's biological siblings and would like to know the young men who shared her daughter's heritage. The suggestion surprised Maya, but she realized it made perfect sense. Eleanor and Robert had been part of her family for 28 years, while Marcus and David were just beginning to be part of her life. Having both families meet felt like a natural step toward integrating all the pieces of her identity. Maya drove home that night feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The conversation she had dreaded had actually brought her closer to Eleanor and Robert, and she finally understood the depth of their love for her. They hadn't kept information from her out of selfishness, but out of fear of losing the daughter they cherished so deeply. 2 weeks after her emotional conversation with Eleanor and Robert, Maya found herself in the unusual position of planning a family gathering that would bring together two completely different worlds. Patricia had enthusiastically agreed to bring Marcus and David to Ohio to meet Maya's adoptive parents, and Eleanor had spent days preparing for their visit with the same nervous energy she had shown when Maya brought home her first boyfriend in high school. Maya chose to host the meeting at her own apartment, feeling that neutral territory might be less overwhelming for everyone involved. She spent the morning cleaning every surface and preparing snacks, trying to channel her nervous energy into productive activities. The weather had turned warm and sunny, which felt like a positive sign for what could potentially be an awkward encounter. Eleanor and Robert arrived first, bearing flowers and a homemade cake that Eleanor had baked specifically for the occasion. Maya could see that her adoptive mother had dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing a conservative blue dress that Maya recognized as one of Eleanor's favorites. Robert carried a small wrapped gift, though Maya couldn't imagine what he might have brought for people he had never met. Patricia, Marcus, and David arrived precisely on time, and Maya watched through her window as they stood outside her building, clearly gathering courage before coming upstairs. When she opened the door, Patricia was carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a nervous smile that reminded Maya strongly of her own expression in stressful situations. The introductions were formal at first, with everyone being overly polite and careful with their words. Eleanor thanked Patricia for taking care of Maya's biological family history, while Patricia expressed gratitude to Eleanor and Robert for raising Maya with such love and providing her with opportunities. Maya found herself playing translator between the two families, helping them find common ground in their shared affection for her. The atmosphere began to relax when Robert presented his gift to Marcus and David. Inside the wrapping was a photo album he had created, filled with pictures of Maya from infancy through adulthood. He had included images from school events, family vacations, graduation ceremonies, and casual moments that captured Maya's personality and growth over the years. Marcus and David were visibly moved as they flipped through the pages, seeing their half-sister's life documented in chronological order. Patricia wiped away tears as she pointed out resemblances between Maya and Denise in some of the childhood photos. Eleanor added stories about each picture, sharing memories that brought Maya's upbringing to life for her biological family. David asked Eleanor about Maya's education and career development, and Eleanor lit up as she described Maya's artistic talents and academic achievements. She showed Patricia some of Maya's early artwork that she had saved, including finger paintings from elementary school and more sophisticated pieces from high school art classes. The conversation took an interesting turn when Patricia mentioned Denise's own artistic abilities and how similar they were to Maya's style. Eleanor admitted that she had always wondered where Maya's creative gifts came from, since neither she nor Robert had artistic backgrounds. Learning about the genetic connection provided an answer to a question that had puzzled her for years. As the afternoon progressed, the adults found more areas of common ground than anyone had expected. Robert and Marcus discovered a shared interest in working with their hands, though Robert's woodworking hobby was quite different from Marcus's automotive expertise. Eleanor and Patricia bonded over their experiences raising children and their mutual concern for Maya's well-being. David, who was closest to Maya in age, asked her about her experience growing up as an adopted child. Maya was honest about the love and stability she had received from Eleanor and Robert, but also about the questions and curiosity that had always been present in the background of her life. David shared some of the conversations he and Marcus had had over the years about their missing sister and their mother's sadness about the adoption. The most emotional moment of the gathering came when Patricia asked Eleanor about Maya's childhood personality and behavior. Eleanor described a happy, curious child who had always been confident and secure in her family's love. Patricia shared this information with Marcus and David, explaining that Denise had always worried about whether her daughter was happy and well-adjusted. Eleanor surprised everyone by asking Patricia to tell them more about Denise's personality and interests. She explained that she had always been curious about the young woman who had entrusted Maya to their care, and she wanted to understand more about Maya's biological heritage. Patricia shared stories about Denise's love of teaching, her dedication to her children, and her artistic talents, painting a picture of a woman who had made a difficult but loving decision. As the conversation continued, Maya realized that both families had been carrying pieces of her story that were incomplete on their own. Eleanor and Robert knew about her childhood and development, but had always wondered about her genetic heritage and biological family. Patricia, Marcus, and David knew about Denise's love for her first daughter and the family traits Maya had inherited, but they had never known whether the adoption had been successful or if Maya was thriving. The turning point in the gathering came when Eleanor asked to see more photos of Denise. Patricia had brought several albums, and as they looked through images of Maya's biological mother, Eleanor made an observation that surprised everyone. She pointed out that in many ways Maya had grown up to embody the best qualities of both families. She had inherited Denise's artistic talents and independent spirit, but she had also developed Eleanor and Robert's values of hard work and dedication to education. Robert, who had been quiet for much of the afternoon, suddenly spoke up with emotion in his voice. He told Patricia that he hoped she would always know how grateful he and Eleanor were to Denise for choosing them to raise Maya. He explained that becoming Maya's parents had been the greatest joy of their lives, and they had tried every day to be worthy of the trust Denise had placed in them. The conversation shifted when Marcus asked Maya if she planned to stay in contact with their biological family. Maya looked around the room at all the faces watching her expectantly, and she realized that this question represented everyone's underlying concern about how these relationships would work moving forward. Maya explained that meeting her biological family had answered questions she had carried her entire life, but it hadn't changed her feelings about Eleanor and Robert as her parents. She wanted to maintain relationships with both families because each one contributed something important to her sense of identity and belonging. Eleanor surprised everyone by suggesting that they make their gathering an annual tradition. She proposed that both families come together each year around Maya's birthday to celebrate not just her birth, but also the decision that had brought them all together. The idea was met with enthusiastic agreement from everyone present. As the evening wound down, Patricia pulled Eleanor aside for a private conversation. Maya watched from across the room as the two women who had shaped different parts of her life spoke quietly together. Later, Eleanor would tell Maya that Patricia had thanked her for raising Maya with such love and stability, and had expressed how proud Denise would have been of the woman Maya had become. Before leaving, David asked Maya if she would consider visiting them again soon, this time to meet some of their extended family members who had heard about her and wanted to welcome her into their lives. Maya agreed, feeling more confident about navigating these new relationships now that she had seen how well both families could get along. The cleanup after everyone left gave Maya time to process what had just occurred. Her apartment had been filled with laughter, tears, stories, and connections that she never could have imagined a few months ago. The two families that had seemed so separate and different in her mind had found ways to appreciate and respect each other. That night, Maya called Patricia to thank her for making the trip and to express how meaningful the day had been. Patricia told her that Marcus and David had talked nonstop during their drive home about how much they liked Eleanor and Robert and how happy they were that Maya had been raised by such caring people. Maya also called Eleanor and Robert who were still processing their own emotions from the meeting. Eleanor admitted that she had been nervous about meeting Maya's biological family, worried that they might judge her and Robert as inadequate parents. Instead, she felt validated and appreciated for the role she had played in Maya's life. As Maya prepared for bed, she looked at the photo albums and keepsakes spread across her coffee table, mementos from both families that told the complete story of her life. For the first time since beginning her search for her biological roots, Maya felt truly whole and complete, surrounded by love from multiple sources rather than torn between competing loyalties. 6 months after that first family gathering, Maya found herself standing in front of a classroom full of teenagers at a local high school, sharing her adoption story as part of a life skills program. The invitation had come through Patricia, who worked as a school nurse and had suggested that Maya's experience might help students who were facing difficult family situations or questions about their own identities. Maya had initially been nervous about speaking publicly about such personal matters, but as she looked out at the diverse group of students, she realized that her story might resonate with young people who felt disconnected from their families or uncertain about their place in the world. She began by explaining how she had grown up in a loving adoptive home, but had always wondered about her biological roots. The students were surprisingly engaged, asking thoughtful questions about the DNA testing process, the emotions involved in meeting biological family members, and how she had navigated the potentially complicated relationships between her adoptive and biological families. Several students shared their own experiences with blended families, divorce, or adoption, creating an unexpectedly deep discussion about what family really means. One student asked Maya whether she thought Denise had made the right decision by choosing adoption. Maya paused before answering, thinking about all the experiences and opportunities she had gained from being raised by Eleanor and Robert, while also acknowledging the love and sacrifice that Denise had demonstrated by placing her for adoption. Maya explained that she believed Denise had made the best decision she could with the information and resources available to her at the time. She emphasized that adoption wasn't about one family being better than another, but about matching children with families who could provide what they needed at that particular time in their lives. After the presentation, a quiet girl approached Maya privately. She explained that she was currently pregnant and considering adoption, but she was struggling with feelings of guilt and uncertainty about whether giving up her baby would make her a bad person. Maya spent nearly an hour talking with the girl, sharing not just her own perspective but also what she had learned about Denise's decision-making process through the journal entries and letters. The conversation with the pregnant teenager stayed with Maya for days. She realized that her story could potentially help other young women who were facing similar decisions to the one Denise had made nearly 3 decades ago. Maya began volunteering with an adoption support organization, offering to speak with expectant mothers who were considering placing their children for adoption. Through this volunteer work, Maya discovered another unexpected piece of her own story. The adoption agency that had handled her case was still operating, and the social worker who had worked with Denise was still employed there, now serving as the agency's director. When Maya contacted the agency to offer her services as a volunteer, the director, Mrs. Henderson, immediately remembered her case. Mrs. Henderson invited Maya to lunch and shared memories of working with Denise during the adoption process. She described a young woman who had been heartbroken about her decision, but absolutely determined to find the best possible family for her daughter. Denise had interviewed several potential adoptive couples before choosing Eleanor and Robert, and she had specifically requested updates on Maya's well-being during the first few years. After the adoption, the revelation that Denise had actively chosen Eleanor and Robert from among multiple options gave Maya a new perspective on her adoption story. It hadn't been a random placement or a desperate decision made in crisis, but rather a careful choice made by a young woman who wanted the absolute best for her child. Mrs. Henderson also revealed that Denise had left a sealed letter to be given to Maya if she ever contacted the agency as an adult. The letter had been sitting in Maya's file for nearly a decade, waiting for a day that Denise hadn't lived to see. With trembling hands, Maya accepted the envelope and decided to read it later in the privacy of her own home. The letter, dated when Maya was 18 years old, was Denise's final message to the daughter she had placed for adoption. In it, Denise expressed her hope that Maya had grown up happy and successful, surrounded by people who loved and supported her dreams. She wrote about her own life, her marriage, her sons, her career as a teacher, but emphasized that not a day had passed when she didn't think about her first daughter and wonder how she was doing. Most importantly, Denise wrote about her lack of regret regarding the adoption decision. She explained that every milestone in Marcus and David's lives had reminded her of experiences Maya was hopefully having with her adoptive family, and that knowledge had brought her peace rather than sadness. Denise ended the letter by telling Maya that she hoped they might meet someday, but if that never happened, she wanted Maya to know that she had been deeply loved from the moment of conception. Reading the letter, Maya felt a sense of closure that she hadn't realized she was still seeking. All the questions about whether she had been wanted, whether Denise had regretted her decision, or whether her biological mother had loved her were finally answered definitively. Maya decided to share the letter with both families during their second annual gathering, which took place at Eleanor and Robert's house that year. As she read Denise's words aloud, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Eleanor and Robert were moved to hear Denise's gratitude for their role in Maya's life, while Patricia, Marcus, and David felt comforted by their sister and mother's lack of regret about the adoption. The gathering had evolved from the previous year's tentative meeting into a genuine celebration of family in all its forms. Marcus had brought his new girlfriend, who was curious to meet the extended family she had heard so much about. David shared news about his upcoming graduation and his job prospects in software development. Eleanor and Patricia had developed their own friendship, staying in touch between family gatherings and sharing photos and updates about their respective families. As Maya looked around the table during dinner, watching Eleanor teach David her famous recipe for cornbread, while Robert and Marcus discussed the restoration project Robert was working on in his garage, she marveled at how naturally everyone had blended together. The artificial boundaries she had once imagined between her adoptive and biological families had dissolved, replaced by genuine affection and mutual respect. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Maya sat in her childhood bedroom at Eleanor and Robert's house, surrounded by mementos from both families. She thought about the journey that had begun with a simple DNA test and had led to a complete understanding of her identity and origins. Maya realized that her story wasn't really about abandonment and revelation as she had once thought. Instead, it was about love taking many different forms and families being created through choice as much as through biology. Denise had chosen to place her for adoption out of love. Eleanor and Robert had chosen to adopt her out of love. And now both families had chosen to embrace each other out of love for Maya. The questions that had haunted Maya for most of her life had been answered. But more importantly, she had learned that being loved by multiple families didn't diminish any of those relationships. It simply meant she was fortunate enough to be surrounded by more people who cared about her well-being and happiness. Maya fell asleep that night, feeling grateful for every decision that had led to this moment. From Denise's brave choice as a teenager, to Eleanor and Robert's decision to open their hearts and home to a child who needed them. Her life had been shaped by acts of love from people who had put her needs above their own fears and desires, and she was determined to honor that legacy by helping other families navigate similar journeys with courage and compassion.